Let's do that hockey.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 119 of Dobber Prospects Radio. I'm your host, as always, Peter Harling. And this episode, we're getting back to my top 10 prospect rankings, team by team. And in alphabetical order, this episode takes us to Montreal Canadiens. We're actually kind of breaking the alphabetical rule and skipping Minnesota Wild, but don't worry, I'll be coming back with them in a couple of days with regular guest to the show, Russ Cohen, and we'll be going over Montreal, Minnesota Wild prospects. But today I'm going to be going over the Montreal Canadiens, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Amy Johnson from the AHL Report. You can find her on Twitter at the AHL Report, and she is a podcast host for the Press Zone. Welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you so much, Peter. Great to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So for anyone who wants to read along with the top 10 prospects, the rankings are posted on NHLRumors.com, and there'll be a link in the show notes if you want to find the article or just the top 10 rankings. So Amy is the Laval expert for the Habs and covers their prospects deep, watches every game, is in conversations with players and coaches. So really excited to be joined by someone who has a far more detailed and in-depth knowledge of the Habs prospects than I do. And she can help point out all the errors of my way in my top 10 rankings.
I'll try to live up to that.
be gentle. So this article was actually posted a few months ago. So there are some things that might have changed a little bit if I were to rank them today. For example, the number one prospect I had was Cole Caufield. He was still under 25 NHL games played at the time this article went to print. So we'll start with Cole. He had an amazing American hockey, NCAA career. Led the league and Hobie Baker and all that. Gold medal with U.S. at the World Juniors, and signed last year as at the end of the season with the Habs, so his pro contract, and quickly played his way out of the American Hockey League and right into the Habs lineup for that Cinderella playoff run that they had. And looked like he was going to be a surefire slam dunk for the Calder Trophy, and didn't really have a super start to the season. And then since they swapped their coaches and went with Martin St. Louis, he has turned into everything that everyone thought that he would be. So let's talk a little bit about Cole Caufield. I think he's pretty well documented at this point, but it's nice to see that he's playing his way into, not necessarily a little too late for Calder Trophy consideration, but, if he would have been playing like this all season, that's exactly where he would be, in the Calder Trophy wheelhouse. What can you tell me about his slow start and his turnaround?
Well, and that's just it. If he had been playing in this manner since the beginning of the season, absolutely, he would be definitely a front runner in the Calder conversations right now. But the fact of the matter is, he didn't play like this all season. In fact, it took until there was a coaching change for Cole Caufield to break out of whatever dark cloud or slump or just whatever was going on with Cole Caufield. It was concerning. He even went down and did a brief stint in the AHL this season while Dom Ducharme was the head coach. And frankly got brought back up pretty quickly. What was it that was not working for Cole Caufield in the beginning of the season? Well, plenty of people will probably say that maybe Dominic Ducharme had something to do with that. Dom Ducharme's work with some of the younger players and the prospects. And while there is quite possibly certainly a connection there, I think some of it too is just Caufield's growth in the NHL. Yes, he just stormed onto the scene last year, played as you said, just not even a cup of coffee in the AHL before he was called up to the NHL. They went on that deep playoff run, and he looked like the player that we saw him be in the NCAA. This season, he the big thing for Cole Caufield is he couldn't score. And it was obvious that the longer it went that he couldn't get into the back of the net, the more it was weighing on him, the more that it was affecting his confidence. And I think that cycle, that's the first time really in Cole Caufield's career that he's faced that kind of adversity in his game. And whether it was that he didn't know how to get out of it, whether it was not the right coaching staff and support system in place, who knows? Martin St. Louis comes in and he's obviously restored Cole Caufield's confidence. It's wonderful to see the beaming smile of Cole Caufield each and every game. He's having fun again. He's enjoying the game, and he's doing, obviously, kind of the shackles are off. He's doing the things that he knows how to do best. He's shooting and he's finding the back of the net. I believe he's already had another assist in a game that he's playing right now. So the shooter side of Cole Caufield is back. I think it's very exciting for fans. I think everyone is breathing a sigh of relief that, okay, Cole Caufield's not broken. But there's just, for me, Cole Caufield still needs to work on his defensive game. That is still, it's great that Martin St. Louis has kind of let him loose and said, go do what you do best. And I love that. I just would still caution that he needs a lot of work on the defensive side of his game as well.
Well, as a fantasy hockey owner of Cole Caufield in one of my leagues, I'm ecstatic about his rediscovery of his game here. And I'm super pleased that I didn't give up on him and trade him away or anything like that. So hopefully everyone listening out here was either held on to him or was smart enough to pick him up when he was in his slump and is now reaping the benefits.
That's right.
All right. So he's on the roster. He's kind of established himself as an NHL player for the rest of his career now. So let's move down and look at the next guy that I have ranked on my list, and that's Kaiden Guhle. Big defenseman, physical, skates well, good offensive. I mean, this is a player who could potentially project as a top pairing. He was traded in the Western Hockey League this season from Prince Albert to the Edmonton Oil Kings, where he'll have a really good shot at making it to the Memorial Cup if he can get past Winnipeg and do some damage in a long playoff run and get some valuable experience in what should be the final season of his junior career before he turns pro. Is this a player that you would have this highly ranked in the Canadiens system as well? Because they have a number of defensemen that we'll go over. So minutes on the blue line in the next couple of seasons in Montreal are going to be hotly contested.
That is for sure, both in Montreal and in the AHL in Laval. It's going to be a lot of heavy competition for ice time and roster spots. But I agree with you. Kaiden Guhle is definitely tops for defensive prospects still to come onto the scene for the Montreal Canadiens. This kid's got 7 goals, 33 assists this season between his two WHL clubs. This is a young man that likely will not spend long in the AHL. I think that the Canadiens will. He presented well both at training camp and the short little stint that he did with the Laval Rocket in just the 3 games that he played last season. Looked to be very poised and ready to go, and he's really showing this season that's just he's developed even further than that. I think he's not going to be long for the AHL. I think he'll be in the NHL pretty quickly. And the great thing is he also brings a lot of leadership qualities for a young man. He's very mature, very grounded, both off the ice and on the ice. So I think it's a big plus. I think it's a prospect that the Canadiens are going to welcome with open arms.
Yeah, I mean, he's strong and physically developed, and he's got size. So I think he's very ready for the pro game, and won't be long before he's in the NHL. That's great because they could use some replacements on the blue line. They've traded away some players at the deadline here. They lost Shea Weber. So the door is open for some of these prospects to come through. Another player that looks like Montreal has got some questions around is their starting goaltender, the future of Carey Price is a little bit questionable right now. And a few years ago, I had Cayden Primeau, who was my third ranked prospect. I had him pegged as the next starting goalie for Montreal, and kind of not even just the next starting goalie. Montreal's got a rich history of elite goaltending. And Cayden Primeau's NCAA career was pretty impressive, very spectacular. Now, he's been, I would say, very good in the American Hockey League, and the Habs have had the luxury of having Carey Price play in goal for them up until this season, and it allowed Cayden Primeau to develop at a nice, comfortable, steady rate in the American Hockey League, and goalies can sometimes take a little bit longer. How has he looked? Because I haven't watched enough to be an expert on him the way you are, but I look at his stat line and I compare it to what he did at the NCAA level, and it's not disappointing, but it doesn't seem to be trending in that same Hall of Fame direction that I was thinking that this kind of prospect could potentially turn out to be. So anywhere from future Hall of Famer to future NHL starting goalie to a bust. There's a lot of range in there. What do you like for his best case scenario upside, or his most likely case scenario for say?
I wouldn't go as far as to say bust. I'm not seeing Hall of Famer. I'm not seeing Hall of Famer though either. Cayden Primeau, I will say he has been good at the AHL level. Even his AHL stats are not as good as when he was in the NCAA. And part of the issue for me is that Cayden Primeau, this is his third season playing pro, and he has not yet played a full season in the AHL where he can just purely focus on his development. And you're correct. Goaltenders take the longest to develop. Forwards go the quickest, then the defensemen, then the goaltenders. The goaltenders traditionally take the longest. And every time Cayden Primeau has been called up for an NHL stint in the last two seasons, both last year and this year, it has gone disastrously. He's, he'll give up 4 goals in the NHL and get yanked. And that'll happen on back-to-back games or too many times to count. And so then what ends up happening is he gets sent down and he has to restore the confidence again and feel good about himself again. And we saw that happen again with him this year. And then once he gets settled back in the AHL level, then he starts to feel better about himself. He plays well at the AHL level, but it's not translating to the NHL yet. When I've talked to him, he has talked about he understands that he needs to use his size better to his advantage. He sometimes plays small. There's a lot of times, even at the AHL level, that you can see him out of position. So he needs to work on his positioning as well. There are just plenty of little things that he just needs to focus on in his game. I predict he needs another full year in the AHL before they can even consider bringing him up as a full-time backup.
One of the things I've said on this, that's all right. I don't own them in any of my fantasy leagues, so I'm not personally invested here. One of the things I've said on the show a couple of times is for goaltenders, what I think makes the difference between a good goalie to a starting goalie or great goalie is their mental toughness, the ability to shake off a bad goal or, just letting in a bad goal, letting a stinker. All goalies are going to do that. But how they respond to that, does it make them smarten up or snap them out of something, or smarten up or hunker down or say, well, that was embarrassing, I'm not going to let any more go in? Or do they crumble? Because there's a lot of pressure playing pro hockey or in the NHL. You're in front of 20,000 fans. They're all booing or laughing at you or chanting your name and mocking you. And you're also on television. This is going to be a meme on Twitter for the next 3 days, like Nedeljkovic backhand swatting it into his net a couple weeks ago. Right. What do you know about his mental toughness there?
He's not one of those that I would call an emotional goaltender. And I think everyone is pretty aware of goalies that ride the roller coaster of emotions right in front of you from period to period throughout a game. So he's not an emotional goaltender like that. He is able to recover and focus on the next goal and put them behind him. I think it's when he gets buried, if he suddenly has let in 3 or 4 and maybe a couple of them were really soft, then you can start to see that he starts to, I don't want to say panic, but he starts to think about it too much. And I think that's where he starts to overthink what he's doing instead of just relying on his training. So I would say he's kind of in the middle with that. He's not a real, he doesn't get in his head too much, but there are times, I think, in extreme cases where I think it just gets to him. And I think part of that has to do with his maturity and his age. And I think he just needs more seasoning in order to get better at that.
All right. So that's a good start to their top 3 prospects. You've got a potential superstar sniper, a potential top pairing, all round, do it all, Mr. Everything defenseman. And then you've got a potential starting goaltender. That is a good foundation for your prospect pool right there. The next guy I have on my list goes back to the blue line. That's Mattias Norlinder. So interesting file here. He's come over from the SHL this season after having a good season last year with Frölunda. He is the Montreal Canadiens 2019 third round draft pick. He's 21 years old now. He's got okay size, 6'1", 185. He was their playoff leading scorer last year. It's 5 points in 7 games. Pretty impressive for a defenseman. And Montreal signed him after that, brought him over to North America. He's played 6 games in both the AHL and the NHL, and then bounced back to Sweden. He's played 21 games on loan back to Frölunda in the SHL and has a whopping 2 points in 21 games. So this is a player that was, when I wrote this article, was really sort of trending up in the right direction. And now that it's been published, seems to me that he's trending in the opposite direction even harder. What is with the real Mattias Norlinder? Please stand up. What do we have here?
Mattias Norlinder is going to be a solid defenseman. This is one of those cases where I think that the stat sheet doesn't really tell the story. I think Mattias Norlinder came over here. Yes, he has done well in Sweden, particularly last year. And, playing in the SHL is playing against men and older men and playing a hard competitive game. It's a very competitive league. And I think that he really thought that he was NHL ready when he came over here for training camp this year and for rookie camp. And I think it was probably a bit of a shock to his system when he realized that, okay, no, there's going to be an adjustment and maybe I have some lessons that I need to learn. Played that handful of games in the NHL, and then he got sent to the American League. And I've seen reports where he was surprised to get sent down to the AHL, that he didn't, something to the effect of he wasn't aware that he could play in that league. And I think that he didn't know how to deal with all of that. And I think the expectations for himself that he was NHL ready, and then suddenly finding himself in the AHL, I think all of that just kind of culminated into feeling a little bit lost. And so went back to Sweden. He's back with Frölunda. In fact, Frölunda just made it to the semifinals in their playoffs, just qualified for that. So he's getting good experience this year. No, he's not producing points, but I think just him being in an environment that he feels comfortable in, where he can get that confidence back. And now that he knows what is coming and what he's facing when he comes here, I think he's going to be a different person, not athlete, but a different person when he comes back for training camp this coming fall. And I think he'll have a different kind of intellect and maturity as far as how he needs to approach his training camp and what he needs to be ready for. So I wouldn't cross Norlinder off anyone's lists of guys to watch for. I think he could be a solid, second, third pairing defenseman, as long as he can make the transition to the smaller ice. But I think it's been a bit of a roller coaster year for him.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. interviewed and talked to a couple of players as well over my time in hockey. And I've heard a number of occasions of times where I asked players in the Ontario Hockey League specifically who have been drafted and have come back from a development camp or a training camp or some preseason games, or even players that as the season ended were called up and had a cup of coffee in the American Hockey League or even the NHL, and then come back and play a final season in junior. And I asked them about their experience, as limited as it was, in the big leagues. And it's, they always open their eyes wide, and you can just see how they're like, wow, it was a whole kind of different. And it gives them just that little cup of coffee gets them so much more prepared for the next season and what to expect. And it gets rid of, I think, a lot of the uncertainty or the jitters that they might have. And that, they'll be familiar. They have met the guys, they'll have skated with them. And, hopefully that they'll feel like, it's pretty intimidating going from a junior level all the way up to skating with NHL players. But after you've done that for a couple of weeks, you have a pretty good idea of how close you are or aren't to being able to play at that level. And if you feel like, I can hang with these guys, it is just absolute, just confidence just goes straight to their hands and their feet. Okay, so let's move along here. The next player I have on my list, ranking at number 5, is Jesse Ylonen, son of former NHL great Juha Ylonen. And at one point I'm going to call him Ylonen because I'm old. So here's a player who has been developing with Montreal for a couple of seasons now. He played with the Rocket in last season's crazy COVID season, and even had an NHL recall. And this season, he spent the majority of his time back in Laval, but he's 30 points through 45 games right now, and he's even played a dozen games in the NHL with Montreal. He's now 22 years old. He's a second round pick from 2018. So, he's pretty close to being what he is and developed, and, not much more room to grow for him, I wouldn't think. And in his 12 games, he's got 5 points. So that's pretty good, actually. And, he's kind of tagged as another version of his father. So anyone who's old like me and remembers Juha Ylonen, he was a good, versatile forward. You could move him up and down your roster if you had injuries or needed a pinch player. You could move up from your third line to your first line for a couple of shifts or even a couple of games. Or you could move him down and try and get some action on your low levels too. And he's a good, reliable two-way player. That's the way I've kind of seen Jesse Ylonen with Montreal, and it looks like he's going to be a legitimate NHL player. How right or wrong am I there?
I would say that you are right on there. I'm going to be quite honest with you. Jesse Ylonen is one of the players that I am most excited about for next season. I am thrilled for him. He is actually currently still up with the Canadiens. He had come up on emergency recall, and they have kept him on even after the player that he was in for came back from injury. He is impressing that well. I actually just sat down for a one-on-one with Jesse 2 weeks ago. It was 2 days before this most recent recall to the NHL for the show that I host of ours on YouTube. And we sat and we talked for 20 minutes about how much influence his dad had on him, how much he learned from Juha. And yes, you're correct. They are very similar players. Jesse has an incredible shot. The release on his shot is, you blink and you miss it. He skates exceptionally. He's got great vision, very high hockey IQ. And yeah, this is a guy who's really only been playing in North America for a year. He was playing in the Finnish Liga before that. So again, like Norlinder, was getting that pro level experience playing in the Liga. And he told me that he spent a lot of time while he was over there in that last year playing in the Liga, that he spent a lot of time analyzing NHL games to mentally start preparing to make that transition to playing in North America. And he felt that that was really a big piece that helped him transition so quickly, because his adaptation to the smaller ice did not take long at all that we saw last year. He's a very dependable player at the AHL level, but he is fitting in just beautifully at the NHL level. And I seriously believe that Ylonen will contend for a roster spot with the Habs come this September.
So you said you had an interview with him for a YouTube show. Is that posted yet?
Yes, it is. If you go to our YouTube channel, that's at youtube.com/allhabs. I host a weekly video program there called Habs Hockey Report. And it was just a couple of weeks ago. You'll see, I believe it was episode 4. Yes, episode 4. And you'll see Habs Hockey Report, Canadiens prospect Jesse Ylonen, published on March 24th, 2022. And that's an exclusive 20-minute interview sitting down with Jesse and just talking about his development and where his game's at, and a little bit of his life in Finland growing up with a dad who played in the NHL.
Excellent. So everyone listening to this episode is getting their regular dose of prospect knowledge with a twist of fantasy hockey information. And now Habs fans, if they weren't already tuned into that, have a great a great outlet that they can subscribe to. Jesse was born in Arizona though, right? So he's got dual citizenship, but I guess his formative years were in Finland.
That's correct. In fact, we touched on that in the interview. I asked him if he had any memory of when Dad was playing for Phoenix and in Tampa before they went back to Finland. And he doesn't recall his time as a baby in the States, but certainly remembers watching Dad play in Finland. So pretty neat memories for him.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Another defenseman on my list, number 6, we've got Jordan Harris, Montreal's 2018 third round pick, 71st overall. He's 5'11", 179. So, not on the big size, but he's bigger than Ryan Ellis. Played 4 seasons at Northeastern University, and the final season that just passed here as their captain. He helped them win a couple of bean pots. He won a hockey. They're a Hockey East, couple titles there.
They're Hockey East. Yep.
Yeah. And he played out his 4 seasons. And of course, you kind of, when you see a player go back for his 4th season, you start biting your nails and thinking, is he going to sign as a free agent somewhere else? But he didn't. He quickly signed after the season for Northeastern ended. And he went from being the Huskies captain to straight to the NHL. And he's got 2 games under his belt. So how has he looked in the NHL so far?
I have to say Jordan Harris made a wise decision to spend 4 years in the NCAA, and he confirmed, it was certainly, there was a lot of hair pulling when he wasn't signing after his sophomore year, not signing after his junior year, as to, oh my gosh, are we going to lose him to free agency? We could hear fans saying that all the time on social media. And he confirmed when his first availability with Montreal just a week or so ago, he said, and we had been trying to remind people of this all the time, that he even said it at his interviews when he was drafted, that my plan and my family's plan, education is our big priority. I'm going to go spend 4 years at Northeastern and I'm going to get my degree. And he just never deviated from that plan. And I had to respect a player for sticking to that when the bright lights of the NHL are calling. It's, I'm sure it's very tempting, but he stuck to his guns. The other part of it too was knowing that he could go back for his senior year, be the captain at Northeastern, because his previous 2 years, that sophomore and junior season, were both interrupted and disrupted by COVID shutdowns. And so, yeah, he had his freshman year, but he really wanted to experience a full NCAA season his senior year, last chance for him to do that. So by doing that, and as far as Northeastern went, he just tore it up in the NCAA this year and to be honest, he, as poised, well-spoken and grounded and calm as he is in a press conference, he does the exact same thing on the ice. The 2 games that he has played, he has not looked out of place whatsoever. He skates beautifully, and just really seems to be calm and confident and just ready to take on the NHL. There's a lot of maturity there, and I'm very excited to see what he's going to do here in these last 10 games or so with Montreal, and then heading into training camp in the fall.
Right. He's going to probably spend some time in the American Hockey League then, I would assume, right? That's getting his cup of coffee in the NHL, burning a year of his ELC. He'll have one more season next year on his ELC. I would suspect that'll be spent largely in the American Hockey League, given the fact that the Canadiens have, a number of NHL players under contract already on the blue line.
They do, unless he makes them have to make a tough decision come the fall, and he seems to be the determined type that could do that. So I think he'll be one of the ones to watch during training camp to see what happens there.
All right. So another player that has signed with Montreal. I better double check to make sure that Sean Farrell is next guy on my list. He is unsigned, and he is a member of Harvard University, and he should have just played his sophomore season, but because Ivy League was shut down last year, he double dipped for another season in the USHL with Chicago Steel, where he posted 101 points in 53 games. That's not bad.
Just 101 points.
I could do that. I just don't want to.
That's right.
So this year as a freshman in the NCAA, playing with the Crimson, he posted 28 points in 24 games. Also not too shabby. And he made the American Olympic team as well and scored 6 points in 4 games there. And, this is a player who's now 20 years old, 5'9", 174. He's a forward, center left winger, very offensively talented player. And, I wouldn't be surprised if he was lured by the big shiny lights of the NHL and decided to sign a contract soon. I would imagine it would have already happened by now if it was going to happen for the 22-23 season. But this looks like he is a shining star prospect that's going to just keep vaulting up the list. And I have him ranked at 7th right now. That's gonna go up. He's gonna pass some of these players, and some of the guys ahead of him are going to graduate. So by this time next year, he should be in the top 3 would be my guess.
I certainly think that the upward trajectory for Sean Farrell is going to continue. He absolutely has impressed at the USHL level, and in Harvard this year, absolutely did a spectacular job, as you say. 10 goals, 18 assists with Harvard this year. Whether or not I agree, since he has not signed yet, I'm leaning towards believing that he'll probably spend one more year with Harvard, which is never a bad thing. Before making that jump to pro, we look back at Cole Caufield, and a lot of people clamored for Cole Caufield to sign and head to the NHL after his freshman season. And he took it under good advisement to stay for at Wisconsin for one more year. And I think this is going to be a thing that maybe Sean Farrell should stay in the NCAA just one more year, just get a little bit more experience and work on those little details in the game, and then make the jump over to pro, I would bet, for the following year.
Right on. All right. So squirreling down my list, we've got number 8, an OHL player, Jan Mysak, who is a member of the Hamilton Bulldogs. He's the Montreal Canadiens 2020 second round pick, 48th overall, actually. And he's only 6 foot 181, but he plays a pretty physical game. The meat and potatoes of his game, though, is his offense. He has a very hard, heavy shot. He can really rip it. Playing on a pretty offensively talented team in Hamilton, he's got 59 points through 56 games so far. He's a 30-goal scorer. So he is a 19-year-old and I believe this will be his final season of Ontario Hockey League eligibility. So this will be a player that you'll get to watch regularly in Laval starting next season, I think. What can you tell me about Jan Mysak so far?
Well, the fortunate thing is I've actually gotten to watch Jan Mysak play 22 games already at the AHL level. He was one of those who qualified last season.
That's right.
With the CHL shutdown, he was one who qualified and he was permitted to play in the AHL last year, while Hamilton was not playing. And so he played 22 games. He only had 2 goals. But I have to tell you, the tenacity of Jan Mysak is not something to be denied or ignored. He impressed in those 22 games. Production aside, he looked hungry, and there you could see the raw skill and the talent there. Also, just loves to learn. He calls himself a sponge. The guys used to say that he would just walk around with a smile on his face, just soaking in every bit of information he could from the pros around him. And yes, he is tearing it up in Hamilton this year. I expect that he's going to come and make a big impact for the Laval Rocket next year. And a guy that might actually be coming with him, I'm going to go off script here for a minute, is one of his teammates who's been traded to Hamilton this year from the Kitchener Rangers. This is another prospect of the Canadiens, and that's Arber Xhekaj. Arber Xhekaj, 12 goals, 22 assists this season. Hits anything that moves. When we watched him in training camp this year, he is a tough customer, and almost to the point of it being dangerous. He's had some suspensions. He's gotten him. He plays with an edge, and a little bit too much of an edge sometimes. I think that's the one thing he'll need to rein in, as just his maturity with his physical play. But between the two of them, with Xhekaj now playing with Jan Mysak, 2 really solid Canadiens prospects that we could likely see in Laval next season that are just going to make a really big impact. So yeah, I'm really high on Jan Mysak. I'm excited for him to full-time make the jump to pro and see what he can do.
I'm really happy for 2 reasons that you brought up Arber Xhekaj.
Xhekaj, correct.
Just Xhekaj. Okay, because the reason why I'm confused with how you pronounce this is if you aren't familiar with this prospect, his last name is spelled Xhekaj.
That's
phonetically, that's a nightmare. But if we just call him Xhekaj, I'll just pretend I didn't read that name, and I'll just call him that. I actually had a chance to watch him play live recently here in Kingston too, and immediately after the game, I started searching my fantasy league to see if he was unowned in any of my leagues, because the leagues I'm in are pretty deep and they count hits and blocks and penalty minutes. So I thought, well, here's a player who I could probably get.
That's a guy you want.
On an ELC, and he will just stuff those categories for me. He might never score an NHL goal, but that's okay. If he does those things kind of like Radko Gudas, that would be great. Not the greatest skater in the world, so I have a little bit of concern about there, but he does love to hit, and he playing in the OHL, no one wanted any part of him. So it'd be interesting to see how that translates to the pro level. If his skating is a problem enough to hold him back from the NHL. He does get around pretty good, and he's about 12 feet tall, so he's got a pretty wide wingspan and a very long stick to make up for any space that he gives up in a foot race. But yeah, I would be concerned about his over aggressiveness and his ability to maybe chase a hit and get pulled out of position a little bit. But
yeah, it got him in trouble even during training camp when he got into a preseason game for Montreal. He actually injured someone in a preseason game, taking a hard hit, giving a hard hit into the board. So that's something he definitely will need to temper once he turns pro.
Definitely a player you'd rather have on your team than look across the ice, and don't want to chase loose pucks in his corner.
No, that is absolutely right. But so yes, him and Jan Mysak, I think two really solid prospects coming from Hamilton.
Right. Okay, back onto the list. Jan Mysak at 8, and then we move on to another defenseman, and this is Jayden Struble. So he is in the NCAA. He's unsigned. 2019 second round pick 46th overall. He's now 20 years old. He's 6 feet, 194, and he is a teammate of Jordan Harris in Northeastern. And so Jordan Harris will be moving on, but it looks like Struble is going to stay behind. He's a pretty impressive player. I've seen him play a couple of times. He's a bit more of a defensive and physical defenseman. And I think his biggest competition for ice time is probably going to be with Kaiden Guhle.
I would say that too.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I was just going to say we talked about how there's going to be some competition for ice time on the back end, both in Montreal and in Laval. And I think really in Laval next year, we could be looking at Guhle, however long he stays in the AHL. Norlinder, Gianni Fairbrother, and Arber Xhekaj are all going to be prospects vying for ice time. So as you said, it's looking that Jayden Struble is probably going to head back to Northeastern. I think that's probably wise for him to do, and let a season go by that Kaiden Guhle earns his way up into the NHL, and maybe Mattias Norlinder does as well, and that creates a little space for him in the following season to come and actually get some quality ice time, because he's definitely a good defenseman. I think another year at Northeastern would do him good.
Right. And the 10th player on my list is yet another defenseman. And let's not sleep on Josh Brooke, who's been limited to all of 6 games this season due to injury. But, he's a prospect with some pedigree. He is a 2017 second round pick. He's still only 22 years old. He's 6 foot 194. So he's got some good size. And, in his final season in the WHL, he posted 75 points in 59 games for Moose Jaw. And he's got a couple of full seasons of AHL development under his belt. He had a 60-point rookie season and then 33 games in the COVID season last year, and 13 and 15 points. So his point per game production went from 13 and 60 to 15 and 33. So a nice increase there. And now he's basically missed an entire season. What's the feeling with Josh Brooke? Is this a player who we might be sleeping on and some people have kind of forgotten about, but Montreal still has high expectations for him? Or is he going to be able to overcome a lost season of development? Because that can be a problem.
It's really one of the biggest questions surrounding current pro prospects for the Montreal Canadiens is the mystery of Josh Brooke and what's going to happen with him, particularly since he's RFA this summer. And yes, he had a decent, albeit short season last year, and a good outing in 2019-20. Unfortunately, there's times that he has, whether it's kind of unknown as to whether or not there was personality differences with prior coaches. When Joël Bouchard was running the Laval Rocket and whatnot, there were times those games that you see for last year, some of those were when he was playing as a forward. Believe it or not, Bouchard had him playing front for a while. It's actually when he got injured and then had to have knee surgery in the off season, and is why he rehabbed most of this season and didn't actually make his season debut until I believe the end of January. It's been a rough road for Josh Brooke, a little bit of up and down. There were nights, healthy scratch some nights and so forth. And right now he's dealing with that as well. In fact, once he came back from his rehabbing this year, made his season debut, he only made it into a couple of games before he had to go out on injury again, because the knee that he had surgery on was swelling. And so they had to kind of pull him back, go through some rehab again, let the knee heal some more, let the swelling go down. And ever since he's now come back again to start playing, he's kind of in and out of the lineup, because I think they're trying to take it easy on the knee and just make sure that he's not going to have another major setback. So Josh Brooke hasn't really had a chance to get his season started at all. He's not had any kind of regularity since he's even come back from injury. And so I think this season is going to be a bit of a wash for him. The big question is going to be, are they going to qualify him this summer? And is he going to stick around? I think that they'll still qualify him and give him a shot at actually having a full season to see what he's got in the tank. But it's going to be a big make or break year for him next year if he does stay with the organization. And hopefully he can get back to the player that he looked like 2 and 3 years ago, and particularly in the WHL, because the talent is there. It's been a long time since he's had the confidence, both himself and the confidence of his coaching staff as well. And I think that's just not sitting as much as he has and not getting the ice time, I think has just been a little detrimental for Josh Brooke. He's a great guy. He's super nice kid, and has a lot of talent. So hoping that things turn around for him soon.
Absolutely. You hate to see a player's career get ended prematurely because of an injury. And it sounds like he's dealing with a long knee problem. They could be trending towards the chronic side. So yeah, that is alarming. But that does round out my top 10. A couple other players who were on my honorary mentions list that didn't get published, but we talked about Arber Xhekaj. I kind of really interested in him. Not the most fantasy upside, but looking more at points wise, the Canadiens signed Joshua Roy, who is tearing up the Quebec Major Junior League to the tune of almost 2 points a game, 98 points through 54 games. Laval's leading scorer is Raphael Harvey-Pinard. Amy, are there any other prospects, either of these guys or any other prospects who you think have a really, maybe a sleeper sort of offensive upside, players that could make Montreal and could make some noise on the stat sheet?
Well, there's some deeper prospects that I think are certainly up and coming. Gianni Fairbrother is a defenseman who's currently playing for the Laval Rocket. He's injured right now, so he hasn't had a ton of playing time as of late, but add that as another name to the back end of competition for ice time and a roster spot. But I think Gianni Fairbrother, right in there with Mattias Norlinder, could really make some noise once he gets going. You mentioned Joshua Waugh, who of course, yes, he is absolutely tearing things up and making headlines all over the place with the kind of numbers he's putting up. At the same time, another guy who's playing in the queue, who's playing for Acadie Bathurst right now, is Rile Kidney, 2020 run second rounder for the Montreal Canadiens. He's 19, just turned 19, so he'll turn 20 next March. Last season for Acadie Bathurst put up 38 points. This season he's got 86 points. He's got 27 goals and 59 assists for Acadie Bathurst. He is certainly someone to keep an eye on. When he makes the jump to pro, he could be as exciting to watch as Raphael Harvey-Pinard has been for Laval. So I would definitely put Rile Kidney in there for sure.
That is awesome. Amy, thanks so much for your time. And again, if anyone listening wants to get some of the best Montreal Canadiens prospect coverage, you can follow Amy's work on at AHL Report, and her personal Twitter handle is at Flyers Rule. The podcast is Press Zone, and that's on all platforms, is it?
Yes, it is. You can find us on the Press Zone, and I also co-host the Canadiens Connection podcast on our platforms as well.
Nice. And then there was the YouTube show as well that we talked about when we were talking about Ylonen.
That's correct. Habs Hockey Report comes out every Thursday. Just had a new episode published today, and you can find that at youtube.com/allhabs.
Amy is everywhere.
I'm everywhere. We do try here at Rocket Sports Media.
All right. Well, that's going to be it for this episode. Montreal Canadiens went to the Stanley Cup Finals, and now they're in the draft lottery. Look, maybe Shane Wright will be the number one prospect when the next season starts. But they do have a pretty good prospect pool with a number of good problems to have, like how do we fit all these players on our blue line? So something for Habs fans to look forward to. Amy, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I believe Montreal's playing tonight, so I should let you go so you can watch the game.
Thank you so much, Peter. It's a pleasure joining your show. I appreciate the invitation, and thanks so much. Good luck.
Thanks.